My name is Lily, and I am 22 years old. This is my story. It's a story about love, a big dream, and a hard choice. It's a little sad, but I hope it can also be a little hopeful too. I met Ben when I was 19. We were both in our first year of university. I remember the first time I saw him. He was sitting under a big tree on campus, reading a book. He had kind brown eyes and a warm smile. I was a little shy, but I wanted to talk to him. I walked past him, and I accidentally dropped my pen. He picked it up for me. "Is this yours?" he asked, his voice soft. I blushed and said, "Oh, yes, thank you so much." That's how we started talking. We discovered that we had a lot in common. We both loved old movies, walking in the park, and eating ice cream, even when it was cold. Ben was studying engineering. He was so smart and passionate about building things. He used to tell me about his dream. He wanted to design big, amazing buildings that people would talk about for years. I was studying art. I loved to paint and draw. I dreamed of having my own little studio one day. Our first year together was like a dream. We spent almost every day together. We studied in the library, our hands often touching under the table. We went for long walks, talking about everything and nothing. He would tell me about complex engineering problems, and I would try to explain the colors I saw in a sunset. He always listened, really listened. He made me feel like the most important person in the world. I remember our first Valentine's Day. I was 20 then, and Ben was 21. He didn't have much money, but he made it so special. He cooked dinner for me in his small student apartment. It was just pasta with tomato sauce, but it tasted like the best meal I'd ever had. He had lit candles, and he played soft music. He gave me a small, hand-drawn card. Inside, it said, "To my Lily, you make my world brighter." My heart melted. "Oh, Ben," I whispered, "this is perfect." We talked about our future a lot. We imagined a small house with a little garden. He would have his workshop in the garage, and I would have my art studio in a sunny room upstairs. We planned to get a dog, maybe a golden retriever. We thought we would be together forever. It felt so real, so possible. Life was good. Life was simple. Life was us. Then, in our final year of university, when I was 22 and Ben was 23, everything changed. Ben was one of the best students in his class. He worked so hard. One day, he came to my apartment, his eyes shining with excitement. "Lily, you won't believe this!" he exclaimed, waving a letter in his hand. "What is it, Ben? Tell me." I was curious and a little nervous. His excitement was infectious. He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a job. A dream job." "That's amazing!" I hugged him tightly. "Where is it?" "Is it in the city?" His smile faltered a little. "Well, that's the thing, Lily. It's far away. It's in another country." My heart skipped a beat. Another country? Which country? "It's with a huge international company in Germany. They're working on some incredible projects, the kind of projects I've always dreamed of. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Lily." Germany. That was so far away. Thousands of miles. a different language, a different culture. A wave of unease washed over me. Wow, Ben, that's big. He saw the change in my expression. I know it's far, Lily, but think about it. This could set me up for life. It's everything I've worked for. We sat down on my small sofa. The air suddenly felt heavy. What about us? I asked quietly, the question I was most afraid to voice. He took my hands. His were a little shaky. We can make it work, Lily. We can do long distance. We can visit. It will be hard, I know, but we're strong, aren't we? I wanted to believe him. I really did, but a cold fear was creeping into my heart. Long distance? Germany? It sounded like a world away from our little house with the garden and the golden retriever. Over the next few weeks, the job offer was all we talked about, or more accurately, it was the thing we often argued about and then tried not to talk about. But it was always there, like a shadow in the room. Ben was so excited about the career opportunity. He would spend hours looking at the company's website, showing me pictures of the city he might live in. He started learning a few basic German phrases. I tried to be supportive. I really did. I knew how much this meant to him. It was his dream, the one he'd talked about since I first met him under that tree. But every time he talked about Germany, my heart ached a little more. I imagined him on a plane, flying further and further away from me. I imagined lonely nights and calls with bad connections. We can try, Ben, I said one evening, my voice small, but it will be so hard. I know, Lily, but isn't our love worth fighting for? He asked, his eyes pleading. I looked at him. The boy I loved more than anything, the boy who made pasta for me and drew me cards. Yes, I whispered. Yes, it is. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Not because I didn't love him, but because I knew how big this opportunity was for him. It wasn't just a job. It was the job. And I started to feel like I was a problem, an obstacle in his path. The university graduation day arrived. It was supposed to be a happy day. We wore our caps and gowns. Our parents were there, proud and smiling. Ben and I held hands, but there was a sadness between us that no one else could see. He had to give the company his final answer within a week of graduation. That week was the longest week of my life. We spent a lot of time together, but it felt different. It felt like we were saying goodbye, even though neither of us said the words. We went to all our favorite places, the park, the ice cream shop, the spot under the tree where we first met. We tried to be normal, to laugh, but the unspoken decision hung heavy in the air. One evening, we were sitting by the river, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in beautiful shades of orange, pink, and purple, the colors I loved to paint. Ben turned to me, his face serious. Lily, he started, his voice barely a whisper. I have to take the job. The words, though expected, hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. I just stared at the water, the beautiful colors of the sunset suddenly seeming dull and gray. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I tried to hold them back. I understand, I said, my voice choked, And in a way, I did. It was his dream. How could I ask him to give up his dream for me? But another part of me, the selfish, heartbroken part, wanted to scream, "What about my dream? What about us?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away slightly. I couldn't bear his touch right now. It would make the pain too real. "Lily, please," he said, his own eyes glistening. "This is the hardest decision I've ever had to make. It doesn't mean I don't love you. I love you more than words can say. But you love your career more," I said, the words tasting bitter. It wasn't fair, I knew. It wasn't about loving one more than the other. Not exactly, but that's how it felt. It felt like a choice. And he hadn't chosen me. We sat in silence for a long time. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the air grew cold. "When do you leave?" I finally asked. "In 3 weeks," he replied. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to say goodbye to the life we had planned. 3 weeks to untangle our lives, our hopes, our dreams. The next 3 weeks were a blur of sadness and forced smiles. We told our friends. They were sad for us. My parents were worried about me. Ben's parents were excited for him, but they looked at me with sympathy. We tried to make the most of the time we had left. We had a farewell tour of our favorite spots, but everything was tinged with sadness. Every laugh felt hollow. Every touch felt like it could be the last. The day he was supposed to leave, I couldn't go to the airport. I just couldn't. We said our goodbyes at my apartment. It was awkward and painful. There were so many things I wanted to say, but the words wouldn't come out. He held me tight, and I buried my face in his chest, finally letting the tears flow freely. "I'll call you every day," he promised. "We'll make this work." I nodded, unable to speak. He kissed my forehead, then my tear-stained cheeks, and finally my lips. It was a goodbye kiss, and it tasted of salt and sorrow. Then he was gone. I stood by my window and watched him walk down the street, his suitcase rolling behind him, until he turned the corner and disappeared from my sight. And just like that, a chapter of my life was over. The first few weeks after he left were the hardest. My small apartment felt so empty. Everything reminded me of him, the chair he used to sit in, the mug he drank his coffee from, the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered on his pillow. I cried a lot. I didn't feel like eating. I didn't feel like painting. The colors that used to bring me so much joy now seemed flat and uninspiring. He did call. Just like he promised, we talked every day at first. He told me about his new job, his new apartment, the new city. He sounded excited, and a part of me was happy for him. But another part of me felt a growing distance between us. Our conversations became shorter. Sometimes the connection was bad. Sometimes the time difference made it difficult. I tried to be busy. I started looking for a job myself. I had my art degree, but it was hard to find something in my field right away. I took a part-time job in a coffee shop. It wasn't my dream, but it was something. The calls with Ben became less frequent. From every day, it went to every few days, then once a week. The excitement in his voice was still there when he talked about his work, but there was a new note too. A tiredness. He was working long hours. He was trying to learn a new language, adapt to a new culture. I understood, but it still hurt. I often found myself thinking, what if I had asked him to stay? Would he have? And if he had, would he have resented me for it later? It's a question that I'm sure many people in similar situations have asked themselves. Have you ever had to make a really difficult choice between your heart and your head, or maybe between a person you love and a big opportunity? What did you do? It's so tough, isn't it? I felt so alone with these thoughts. Months passed. The sharp pain in my chest started to dull, replaced by a constant, low ache. I painted a little, but my art was sad. Lots of blues and grays. I missed Ben terribly, but I also started to realize that the us we were trying to hold on to was fading. We were living separate lives, in separate worlds. One day, about 6 months after he left, we had a call. It was a short, stilted conversation. There were long silences. Finally, he said, "Lily, this isn't working, is it?" Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time they were different. They weren't just tears of sadness, but also of resignation. "No, Ben," I said softly. "It's not." It was the hardest, most honest conversation we've had in months. We both cried. We both said we would always love each other. But we also both knew it was time to let go. It was a mutual decision. Born out of a painful reality. The distance was too great. Our lives were moving in different directions. Hanging up the phone that day felt like closing a very important book, a book filled with beautiful memories, but a book that had to end. The pain of the breakup was immense. It felt like a part of me was missing. For a while, I was lost. I didn't know who I was without him. We had been Ben and Lily for so long. Now, I was just Lily. My friends were amazing. My best friend, Sarah, would come over with ice cream and movies, just like in the old days. But this time, to comfort me. Not to double date. She would listen to me talk for hours, or just sit with me in silence when I didn't want to talk. My parents were supportive too, always calling to check in on me. Slowly, very slowly, I started to heal. I started to focus on myself. I was still working at the coffee shop, but I started applying for jobs related to art. I sent out my portfolio to galleries and design studios. I got many rejections, but I didn't give up. One day, I got a call from a small local art gallery. They were looking for an assistant. It wasn't a big, glamorous job, but it was in the art world. I was so excited. I got the job. Working at the gallery was a turning point for me. I was surrounded by art and creative people. I started to feel inspired again. I started painting more, and my colors began to change. There were still blues, but now there were also yellows and pinks and greens. My art wasn't just sad anymore. It was about my feelings, my journey, my healing. I made new friends. I started going out a little. I even went on a few dates, but nothing serious. I wasn't ready for that. I was rediscovering myself, Lily, the individual. I learned that I was stronger than I thought. I learned that I could be happy on my own. It wasn't easy. There were still days when I missed Ben. Sometimes I would see a couple holding hands or hear a song we both loved, and a wave of sadness would wash over me. But it didn't consume me anymore. The memories were still precious, but they didn't hurt as much. I realized that Ben choosing his career wasn't about him not loving me enough. It was about him being true to himself and his dreams. And in a way, his decision, as painful as it was for me at the time, forced me to find my own path, to build my own life. I started to think about my own dream again. My little art studio. I started saving money for my job at the gallery. I took on some small freelance art projects. It was slow progress, but it was progress. About 2 years after Ben left, I was 24. I had my own small apartment now, a little bigger than the last one. One corner of my living room was my designated art space. It wasn't a separate studio yet, but it was mine. My paintings were getting noticed. The gallery where I worked even displayed a few of them. And I sold my first piece. The feeling was incredible. It was a validation of my passion, my hard work. Sometimes I wonder what Ben is doing. Is he happy? Is he designing those amazing buildings he dreamed of? I hope so. I truly wish him well. We haven't spoken since that last difficult phone call, but there's no anger left in my heart. Only a soft echo of a love that was once very real. Looking back, that heartbreak was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But it also taught me so much. It taught me about resilience, about the importance of my own dreams, and about the strength I never knew I had. It's funny how life works, isn't it? Sometimes the things that seem like endings are actually new beginnings in disguise. I wonder, have any of you listening ever experienced a painful breakup that ultimately led you to discover your own strength or a new path in life? It's such a personal journey, and I'd love to hear if you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about it in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our experiences makes a big difference. Today, I am 25 years old. I still work at the gallery, but now I'm a junior curator. I have a small, dedicated studio space that I rent with another artist friend. It's not the sunny room in a house with a garden that I once dreamed of with Ben, but it's my own, and I love it. My art is my voice. It tells my story, a story of love, loss, and finding myself again. Life is different now. It's not the life I planned with Ben, but it's a good life. It's my life. I am happy, I am strong, and I am hopeful about the future. The heartbreak was a part of my story. A sad chapter, yes, but it wasn't the whole story. There are still many more pages to write. Thank you for listening to my story.